Hi everyone and welcome back. This is Sky coming on to talk to you about some interesting concepts relating to the transits of Neptune. I wanted to come on today as we have just had Neptune move into the anaretic degree of Pisces. It's a major part of the May 2024 astrology and the next about year and a half cycle. I've gotten quite a few requests to talk about this, as I have not been able to talk about it too much individually. On Patreon, I do have some premium content where I've gone ahead and talked about both Neptune and Saturn going into Aries in 2026 and some of the major chapter changes and paradigm shifts then. I'm going to link that below in this video if you want to check out that content. But yes, in this video, I want to talk about the timeline that we have Neptune moving in the last degree of Pisces, the anaretic degree. An anaretic degree in astrology, of course, is the final degree of a sign, 29 of any sign. So yes, I think in this video, I'm just going to intuitively channel what I feel about this timeline. I'm also going to talk about the anaretic degree of Pisces in general, and we'll just make some room to see what comes up. So make sure that you have some nice tea or coffee or something to enjoy this video, and do hit the thumbs up button below to get it out there. Okay, so where should we start? First off, the anaretic degree of Pisces, 29 Pisces. This is the total end of a story, right? Pisces is the final sign of the zodiac, the 12th sign of the zodiac. What does it mean to have the planet that is basically the planet of artistry, psychic ability, and emotion to be in the final degree of the final sign of the zodiac? Of course, this would be something that would only happen about every 165 years, as that is how long it takes Neptune to orbit the sun. Of course, the previous time that this would have happened would have been around the time of 1859, 1860-ish. I have not looked at that exact date, but if we subtract 165 from 2024, that's around the time that we would find. So somewhere around that timeline would be around when Neptune was last in Pisces, if someone wants to comment below the exact year, or perhaps I will add that after this video goes up. Feel free to do that. So if we're thinking historically and if we're thinking about paradigms, that was certainly a time of conflict. That was a time of dissolving the previous conventional approach to life, the way that life worked, the way that, global integration was moving, the way that we conceptualized matters of, the economy, the caste system. All of those things were drastically changing, dissolving, and giving war vibes, right? So doesn't that resonate also for where we're at now? Though this is not so much about war, although when Neptune and Saturn go into Aries, of course, that would make more sense, wouldn't it? It would have at least Neptune back then too. But what this is about with Neptune in the 29th degree of Pisces, the anaretic degree of Pisces, this is about being kind of disenchanted or dismayed or concerned or perhaps ready to see a certain fantasy or fiction or story that we've been telling ourselves or that we've been told begin to dissipate. So dissipation is a major keyword with the anaretic degree of Pisces, regardless of the planet that is there. A loss of cohesion, the total end of a romantic story. Okay, when I say romantic, I mean romanticizing something, or the way in which people will sometimes read or extract meaning from a certain story or element of their life. This is something that begins to fade, and we begin to see a new story coalescing. One of the most difficult things about the anaretic degree of Pisces is there's a feeling of like that light at the end of the tunnel, right? But we're not quite there, but it's very close. So a lot of us will be during this time having a feeling of like, I'm so close to being ready. I'm so close to getting honest with myself. I'm so close to cutting through the BS. I'm so close to extracting the meaning properly from my life. However, there can also still be a hanging on or a counteractive force that wants to reassert the previous, sometimes 1,000-year system, and this can bring about a very polarized conflict. So the anaretic degree of Pisces also deals with storytelling. It deals with the tears that are shed during the time of death. Okay, it deals with final goodbyes. It deals with long-running momentums being just very obviously in their final phase. So it's certainly like the death archetype in tarot. It is certainly also like the world archetype too, even more like the world than the death archetype, because I think that even perhaps the physical theme of death is not quite macrocosmic enough to embody this. It's more of a macro ending than it is a microcosmic like ending or death. So the world card would be a very appropriate archetype to apply to certainly Neptune transiting the anaretic degree of Pisces, and especially the anaretic degree of Pisces, because again, it's the final degree of the final sign, like the final major arcana, the final stride. So definitely, of course, timelines will be linked below in the description box when this is starting. It was around the beginning of May 2024 when Neptune entered the anaretic degree of Pisces, and it will actually move into Aries. I believe it's something like September of 2025. I had that pulled up a second ago. But I know that it will then retrograde back into the anaretic degree, and it won't be until, I believe, January 26, 2026, that it's finally in Aries for the last time. So I'm basically saying that from now until about February 2026, we're going to be experiencing the outcomes of an anaretic Neptune in Pisces. Of course, at the same time, we have Saturn transiting in Pisces too, which is really materializing and making less etheric, less multidimensional the effects of this transit, which in some ways I could see as positive, but it can also mean that errors or mistakes can be a lot more physically and directly costly. However, we do get direct results, or we get direct communication or direct motions that tell us about whether or not there is reality or form to that which we're thinking. So one of the problems with Neptune in the anaretic degree of Pisces would be that people have a tendency to believe things or accept things that don't necessarily have a formed or material proof. This is very much like dogma. This is very much like religious zeal, fanaticism. Would definitely be seen during this time, religious wars, okay, because of an idea that not even just perhaps an individual has, but an entire group of people have through some type of religious bond, which may be directly antithetical to another group's bond. So we are definitely moving back into a time of religious upheaval, of very widely applied dogma, and perhaps even religious paramilitary could be something that we're seeing come up during this time and is actually already visible in many, many parts of the world right now, including the West, including the East, including the North, including the South. Okay, this is a global kind of issue. So yeah, this is also a problem with Neptune in the anaretic degree of Pisces. So we have actually a devolution to multipolarity, meaning that we're looking at things in these like Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern, global North, global South, Eastern, Western divides. This is reductive during this time because the human consciousness in many ways has evolved to be a global consciousness. It's not to say that there doesn't need to be some type of separation or some type of viewpoint which acknowledges certain differences, but this should be fading here, and we should be starting to connect at the level of the heart to understand that there is a commonality between all of humanity. And this is something that has been growing for many years, really since about like the 1990s. This started to get really strong, and I would say it climaxed at around 2019. Then we started to really push backwards in 2020, and we started to like really get very locked down and very stagnated and very focused on why certain things are certain places, which has potential to answer questions about history and the past, but what about the future? Which is also what Neptune in 29 degrees Pisces is asking us. It's like, this is the end of the story, but what happens from here? It is very much like the energy of an epilogue, okay? That was a word that was coming up on Patreon when we were talking about this, was the way in which after certain stories end, there are still continuances. Also, okay, to get very micro and mundane for you all, do you think that this is a good time to start a brand new chapter in your life? I doubt it. All right, we are in epilogue mode. We are not in the new beginning. We are not in the new series, the new story, the new anything really here. So any sort of like scattered or desperate feelings you have to strike out on your own for the first time ever, or to totally begin anew, that is normal during this, because we feel that 0 degrees Aries point of both Neptune and Saturn coming. So there's like this pull to do something we've never done, or there's this pull to drastically reinvent or rebrand or rediscover who we are, to solve the identity crisis at last. But it's not going to be in time for sure until we get into the 26, even 27, even like 28, upwards of 30 period of time of years. So it's a very nice also invitation to relax certain overburdened, overburned, overkill elements of yourself, okay? As the other astrology over the last few years really had people pushing very hard for a very specific goal and result. And now with the 29-degree Pisces Neptune, it's kind of like, I found so much of myself in pushing so hard, but I don't have anything to push anymore. What do I do with myself? There's a lot of that right now. That's very prevalent right now. It's kind of like stillness and shadow, right? It's like, what do I do with myself? What now? And this really forces us to meet God, doesn't it? It forces us to actually understand the subtle language of the universe in these times of stillness, in these times of solitude, in these times of quiet and disconnect. So is it a disconnective or connective transit? Well, it's putting me back into that previous dialogue about devolution into multipolarity, where that is a disconnective force. So because there's been a devolution into multipolarity, or, I can't even call it a devolution to hemispheric sort of global ideation. It's more of devolution to multipolarity, with many different poles and many different sort of power conglomerations that are not in harmony with each other. Because of that, we're having to learn through disconnection, and we're having to learn through disembodiment in some cases, and the loss of dreams, or the loss of connection, or the inability to cross certain borders, or the inability to just change things on a whim. Now, there are certain few people who have this transiting their chart who can still kind of like ghost through and kind of be anywhere, but it comes at a greater cost, whether that's financially or at more of a risk of like, certain escalations or certain last minute changes. It's a little bit more risky even for this group of people, but for the majority of people, it's a time where, you now have to start leaning back into heritage, or you have to start leaning into the locality of where you're at. Again, devolution into multipolarity. It causes a lot more heaviness and gravitation to sort of assert itself into the human condition, meaning that for some people it can be harder to travel lightly, or it can be harder to just, make that sort of spontaneous move. It's a difficult time for spontaneity, though there is a part of this transit that actually wants spontaneity too. But because of the global events happening at the same time as it's stifled. It's a stifled want for spontaneity. So how do we work within this construct? I mean, does that not resonate with everyone right now? Like stifled want for spontaneity. It's so prevalent right now. How do we work with it? I'm trying to just give some time for some natural energy to come in with this. So we actually work with stifled sense of want for spontaneity by beginning to, we're going back to an older message here, getting the energy more out of the head and into the body. All right, there's a very strong crisis right now of pretty much all the body energy being concentrated in the brain and the head, which, has certain positives. Like this can make people very productive. This can make people have quite a, diverse array of ideas about their experience with many different branches and many different connecting points. However, this is exhausting, and it also feels like all roads lead back to center. You know what I mean? Like regardless of how much you think about it, regardless of how much you keep this energy flowing through the mind, here we still are. So it's kind of very, very possible. I'm not going to say kind of, we're going to say it's very possible to be ungrounded during Neptune in 29-degree Pisces. To be thinking about where you are, astral travel being very easy for people who don't even try. Dream activity being very strong. Thinking, and this can also manifest in a very simple way during this time as well, where it's like just through thinking about this goal or through thinking about where you'd rather be or through thinking about what you could be doing instead, it's kind of like you're not here anymore. You're not present. You're not even in the location that you're at, but your body is, but your mind's not. So here's an important time for grounding exercises. It would be good to set this up in May before Jupiter moves into Gemini. We do still have Jupiter and Uranus and Taurus, which is a wonderful grounding force. And this could very well be why there's been a growth of hedonism lately and a growth of pleasure orientation, because it's almost like a desperate push for grounding or a desperate push to connect back with the physical reality of your body, location, and I want to say like weather as well. So there's also a connection to the weather with Neptune at 29 degrees of Pisces, more rainy weather, more precipitation, something about tides and currents and bodies of water, designation of bodies of water, how dumping in bodies of water, okay, like pollution, chemicals, all of that kind of stuff is going to become a very hot topic over this next year, year and a half. Also, things happen very subtly and overnight, and they're difficult to prove. For example, all of a sudden, one's area suddenly has a lot more air pollution, but how do you change that? It becomes kind of like an ambient effect of the environment, and it becomes hard to quantify it and hard to point it out. This is where we get into a very, very chaotic world if we associate deregulation as a sort of like hedonistic positive always, meaning like this may not be a time where deregulation in general is very good, because it could cause this sort of crisis where it's like you don't know how much is where, you don't know, and you can't prove anything. So there's like a lot of crimes also that go unpunished with a Neptune at the 29th degree of Pisces. But yes, when I say weather, the weather of the area that you're in, relating to air pollution, relating to the quality of water, relating to acid rain or clean rain, relating to also an increase just in natural disasters that are unrelated, tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes. This is a period of time for the Earth plane when Neptune is in 29 degrees Pisces, really when there's any planets in that vicinity of the zodiac. It's a period of time where there's a resetting, where there is a culmination and a climax, which means like, you know, weather events, and it means certain very powerful, very obvious, very distinct outcomes that are signs and symbols. Also, I feel it's just not a very good time for risks during this time. People who have like risk liberal personality, like I'm willing to take risks for anything. I'm willing to go to the casino. I'm willing to try skydiving for the first time. I'm willing to go into a country that I've never been to, you know, with my Western passport or something, and I have no clue about the laws here, but I'm just going to chance it, even though perhaps there's been a fall in diplomatic relations between this country and my country. Maybe I don't even know that. There's a lot of this kind of chaos right now too. So this is not to freak you guys out, but here is a period of time where you definitely localize and kind of play things safe. It's a very powerful time for growth of psychic ability, for growth of spiritual connection, for responsible religious practice, okay? Connecting to the ancestors, connecting to heritage magic as well. When I say that, I mean connecting to what your family line or what your heritage has specialized in, secrets of the family, okay, that are actually helpful, recipes perhaps that you can't find on Google or that you can't find in a cookbook that your family has maybe consumed for a long time, which would resonate with your DNA better than, for example, fast food or something. You know, this is really where the power of this time is in knowing what has worked for the last, God, how many degrees? 360 degrees of the zodiac, okay? So what has worked for the last 359 degrees will probably be what works now. It's probably not the 360th degree of the zodiac that we finally implement changes or that we finally strike out anew, you know what I mean? So it's just like a wonderful invitation to not freak yourself out about feeling behind or feeling like the world is outpacing you or feeling that you've been left in the dust. We got this like really scary kind of spirit that came in about 2022, around the time that we had North Node in Taurus and South Node in Scorpio. I was actually talking about this in that video back then, where there was this like really awful feeling of like I've been left behind, or I'm behind in life, or all of my peers are ahead of me, or my business is plateaued and everyone else's is increasing, and what about me? Like, why is this like a saying that I have bad luck? Is there something wrong with me? We got into a really negative cycle with that back then. And it's actually this cycle that's going to heal that. Okay, it's this cycle that's going to either correct that or reassure you that having this level or this outcome in some way in the future or now, and perhaps ways that we can't understand, is actually going to be an advantage for you. So there's all kinds of little, for lack of a better word, magic ways that this time works with us, but we have to be willing to not necessarily understand it right now. We have to trust. Trust and faith being very pivotal keywords of this anaretic degree of Pisces, specifically Neptune and Saturn being there. Things have their own momentums now, you guys. We don't need to get forceful with it. You can't stand in front of an oncoming semi-truck and think that you're going to be able to halt that momentum alone. In a lot of senses, I'm seeing people do this with their own lives or with their own life trajectories and thinking, wow, I have like 8 years in this industry, or I have, 15 or 20 years of education, and I think that I'm going to just change it all now. Well, I don't know that momentum is quite ready to disrupt here. And it just feels like also a very desperate time for centralized actions and for, large decisions. It's not to say decisions are not being made here. They are very high level decisions, life and death decisions, multi-century long disputes that result in a decision now are very likely during this next year and a half. What my ancestors did for hundreds of years, is it continued or not? Yes or no? These crazy yes or no decisions also start to come in here. Or perhaps they will also come in when Saturn and Neptune hit Aries in 2026, and maybe now is the time of deliberation, or now is the time of reflection that will lead to that. So if we can think a little bit about, what does one do during a time like that? How does one create their lifestyle? You all, there's just a lot of social, cultural philosophies or preferences right now that really want us to take some type of big action, or really want us to sprint, or really want us to, make $1 million bazillion or something in a few years. And all of this is just so out of relevance. And I think that this is see if I can articulate this correctly. It just plain doesn't matter at this point, honestly. There are baselines that are important. We need money to survive. We need partnership in our lives in some cases. We need community connection. There are things that are required, but I'm talking about this sort of marginal lust that has been so in for the last few years, where it's how am I going to realize my 10-year plan within the next 1 year? How am I going to retire myself within a 15-year career instead of a 30-year career? All of this attempt to gain an edge up, or I'm going to redact that, to gain a perceived edge up, because that's all that it is. Okay. This is definitely a period of time where people trust way too much in the sort of arbitrary material. What do I mean by that? So trusting in your fiat currency in the bank account, trusting in your portfolio of stocks, trusting in, this margin versus that margin. Also trusting that someone who's cheated on you, for example, or someone who you've had just a constant debilitated relationship with is going to somehow marry you, or is going to somehow, keep coming back and forth, or things are going to be shared, or also that, things need to be rushed and things need to happen right now, because if things happen right now, I'm going to finally have enough power as a person. Imagine pieces of paper being what people determine their power as a human on. Let's say that to people with a terminal illness, for example, and see what they think about, the pieces of paper and all the fiat currency and stuff. You see, it's people lose track of the real essence of who they are. They forget the power they have in time. They remember the power that they have in money. So this is something that has to really dissolve here. This is something that we have to work out of our psychological consciousness, because it is almost unimaginable for you all what 10 minutes of time, if you could put a dollar value on 10 minutes of time, you couldn't. It would outweigh the entire monetary system. So this is where we get like really mixed up, right? Pisces, Neptune, Saturn and Pisces. It gets kind of mixed up with time and money and like, yeah, I think that I will, sell something off for an arbitrary kind of unit of measurement that I don't really understand. There's a lot of this kind of like confusion. It's like, if I could just have this amount of money, if I could just, and it's very desperate, and it's very lacking in leverage or lacking in real tangible essence. And that's why there's no money coming in for it either. So yes, beyond baselines, beyond the necessary margins of life, it's going to be very important with this transit to fall back on what brings you joy and what works for you as a person. Because there's going to be, and this is a kind of maybe a frightening prediction for some people, but there's going to be a lot of people who have like all of those financial metrics or all of that status or all of that prestige, and it's going to dissolve in comparison to like 30 seconds of the worries that they have to face every day. It's going to basically not matter anymore. It's going to have all kind of been like a mental, as the monetary system is designed to be a mental, it's one of the ways that confusion proliferates. It's one of the ways that time is extracted from people, and blood as well. So it's important during this time to remember the sanctity of your own time, and to also think about like, is this the way to spend my time? Is this efficient? Efficiency is a wonderful focus here, right? This is like Virgo, the opposite of on the Pisces axis. Efficiency is a wonderful thing to consider. How long is my commute? How close am I to my family? Am I able to work on what matters to me as a person? What can I reconcile or reclaim in my life that will help me to master the things that truly matter to me in this life experience? And how can I, because yes, we are still in the real world, and as I said, there are baselines that have to be met when you think of finance or you think of any of those things. How can I most nimbly and smartly, or most intelligently, most efficiently generate what is necessary for me? So it's a very rewarding time for people who have like a survivalist, or even like achieving that which is necessary to do the real thing. Very rewarding time for those types of people. Also, if your energy's in the right place, you can just be elevated very quickly, right? This is one of the most elevated points of the zodiac. So it's still very easy to, just by like clicking things in your mind, or just through like kind of like psychically understanding trajectories, you can almost like ride currents that just put you where you want to be without having to push so hard. So I've been talking for a long time on the channel about over pushing, overdoing, overkill, despondence, and misery that relates from equating pushing or force with progress. And this is going to be something that becomes more obvious than ever with this transit. So it's like a wonderful invitation to stop hurting yourself, through stress injuries or through pushing too much. It's a wonderful invitation to relax in what you've already built. And it's a wonderful time to be contemplative, okay? Spiritual contemplation that is free of dogma and fanaticized kind of militant undertones is really the top level design of this current astrological paradigm. And there's an animation about this period of time too. There's a way that things move. There's a dance that the cosmos and also just the earth plane are doing, if you kind of watch. And placing ourselves in that, in a harmonious and respectful and, I want to say, peace-oriented way, will do so much more for you than a social media platform or a bank account or a relationship with a specific type of person. But all of those things will probably click too, just through that. But yeah, there's going to have to be a lot of detachment from the previous way of thinking, like clocking those profits, clocking those numbers, clocking. The clock and time is one of the main symbols of this year cycle, of this 2024 dragon year cycle. And at the same time, Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, they erode and dissolve all of the main symbols of the time. So there's a different way that we're working with time, you all. There's a way that the cosmos, and I would say a way that God is wanting us to think differently about time and wanting us to value it more and wanting us to understand the power that everyone has through time, regardless of other things, right? Because everybody has the same time in a day. That is a very strong equalizer, isn't it? The construct of time. Nobody, for example, people can have more money than another person. People can have more property than another person. People can have more popularity or, romantic flings or more, all kinds of things. But everybody has the same amount of time. So that's where we have, if you're looking for the advantage or if you're looking for the stronger way towards healing, it's really focusing on Saturn right now, isn't it? And focusing on the construct of time. And let me just, while we're here, tell you what, in the most obvious sense, will damage your relationship with time. Okay, addictions, first and foremost. Any type of drunkenness, any type of, it doesn't even have to be severe addictions like drunkenness or something that like makes you black out. It can also even be more minor addictions. They all cost a lot of time. They all make you perceive time differently than it really is. So that's first and foremost. Second is desperate relationships, okay? Scrolling mindlessly through the dating app or dating all these people that you just know it's going to fail with, or keep going back to exes, or thinking, when am I going to get closure with that ex? Thinking, what would I say to that person if I ever saw them again? Thinking, who are they with now? Or it's another great way to lose time is obsession or focus on, previous relationships. We can go ahead and cancel all of that out right now. It's done. It's over. I've canceled it out for you. Another thing which is obvious is money obsession or obsession with money making. This will lose you a lot of time, as you either have to work a lot of hours for a job, or you have to spend a lot of time thinking, I'm going to make this business. And then you have to start thinking about, I'm going to file this paperwork there, and I'm going to have this status there, and I'm going to, connect all these different nodes to this there. And, this can be positive. This is not negative in the same way that these other things are not wholly negative either. With moderation, everything is fine. But yes, people and entrepreneurs, for example, run a very dangerous energy sometimes of their life passing them by much quickly. So an entrepreneur, for example, time passes much more quickly. So they have to be very careful about losing all their time to these stupid little entities and these stupid little money-making regimes. Okay, another thing that causes us to lose time, unconscious media consumption. Watching the news all day, being on YouTube, on TikTok, Instagram, all of these different apps will take a lot of your time too. And I would wager if you have one or more, let's say two or more of these issues, that you're probably so exhausted that you require more sleep, and that's going to take more of your time too. So this is a time where we have to really be precise and measure up what is taking my time. Am I okay with that? Can I completely restructure my day? Can I quit some things? Can I get some things off my plate? You guys know I've been preaching reduction since 2023 because I saw this in 2022 and I couldn't quite articulate it in this way. But now that we're at the 29th degree of Neptune and Pisces, I'm seeing it very clearly. And it's what all of this does and what all this lack of reduction does, what all of this sort of, some people would call it abundance orientation or maximalist orientation as opposed to minimalist orientation. What it does is it just makes time pass so quick that what can we even control ourselves in our lives? And this is our own lives that we're talking about. This is not other people. We're talking about ourselves here, our own individual freedom and our own individual control. Oftentimes is lost by trying to control other things, right? So it's a great time to withdraw the need to control something else. In some cases, to withdraw the need to know something about someone or something else, and to really regroup and ask, am I doing methodically each day the main values of my life? And I would also guess that some people who are even being very successful with appropriately reducing or getting their life more manageable, all of a sudden they have a lot more time, and there might be a sort of idle hands or the devil's handiwork thing going on, or there might be a fear of that, or there might be a vacuum or a void. But this is a positive tool for growth, but for some people it can be problematic. But I think that it's better than having an overpiled plate. I think that it's better than having too much on your plate. Because to think that it's a problem to have these vacuums or to have this open free space and time, to label that problematic is kind of to assert that I should not have free time. I should be constantly occupied with something, and that means you're not a free person. Okay, that means you're occupied. That means someone is monopolizing you, basically. And I think there's probably a lot of programming going on right now that's like, I want to be monopolized, or I want to, like, I only feel comfortable when I have no time on my hands because I'm busy, and that's keeping me productive, and that's keeping me, this is kind of like a robot psychology. So we have to start getting okay with void space with free time, with open-ended things, because that's actually a very powerful thing during this time. And once we get into Saturn and Neptune and Aries, it's not going to hold the same power. So it's not very much longer, is it? It's like a year and a half. It's like January 2026. If you wanted to set a clock until January 2026, that could be smart. What would you like to experience or have between now and then? And what would you not like to have? But it's not very long until we do get very motivated and very goal-orientated about certain things. But this here is a time of really consolidating and reflecting on about 165 years worth of changes, as these are not necessarily here for much longer. Yes, it's a total 165 year paradigm shift that we're about to go through in 2026. And I would think that this would be a very important time for kind of filtering and this was a positive element of that historical time. This was not, as it could end up being a wash if we're not careful, or a lot of things could get lumped in, and we might sacrifice certain things that are actually positive and hang on to things that are not so great. So that's kind of the potential problem of this time. But also I do believe that there really are a lot of very intelligent, sometimes scholarly, sometimes very just common sense, logic oriented people who are figuring it out. But yeah, they're going to have a very big task at hand come 2026 to somehow express that into the world. But that's kind of what we're moving towards. So you could kind of see this as a time of recharging, or a time of, definitely not exhausting yourself before then. So anyway, everyone, I think I'm going to conclude there. What a wonderful video. I've enjoyed this channeling. Do hit the subscribe button below and thumbs up this video to get it out there. If you're new to the channel, as I said, subscribe. And do check the description box below. I've linked the video that I've talked about Neptune and Saturn in Aries in 2026 on Patreon. I also do weekly forecasts over there, and all the monthly sign-by-signs go up each month. So it's a wonderful value. Come and check that out. And I hope you all have a wonderful anoretic 29-degree Neptune in Pisces. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.